Hey guys, tonight we're heading somewhere a little strange somewhere, powdered in white lead, corseted in whalebone, and lit by gaslight that flatters every flaw into mystery. You're going to step into the Victorian era, where beauty was currency but also, somehow, a curse. The kind of curse you could inherit just by being born with symmetrical cheekbones. You probably won't survive this one, at least not with your 21st century sanity intact. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is there. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The candle flickers, the wallpaper, something floral and slightly ominous, cast shadows that look like vines creeping up the wall. You're standing before a gilt-edged mirror. The glass wobbles, just slightly old and uneven, so your reflection blurs at the edges. You blink once. You look good, too good, maybe, and that's where your problems start. In Victorian Britain, beauty wasn't just admired. It was dissected, ranked, and weaponized. Every curl of hair, every shade of skin, every inch of waistline said something about who you were, what class you belonged to, and how safely or dangerously you could move through society. If you were too beautiful, you became a walking scandal in a world built on restraint. The funny thing is, people didn't even agree on what beautiful meant. Historians still argue whether the ideal woman was supposed to look like a fragile angel or a decorative ornament. But one thing's sure, looking too perfect could ruin your prospects. Men desired you. Women resented you. Gossip papers devoured you. You walk along a London street, carriages rattling past, skirts brushing against puddles of soot and horse dung. Every eye seems to follow you, and that's not a compliment. In this age, public attention was a double-edged sword, especially if you were female. The gaze itself carried judgment. To be admired was to be exposed. Inside drawing rooms, the concept of beauty was treated like a science experiment. Scholars, mostly men, measured the width of foreheads and the slope of noses with little brass instruments, convinced they could quantify attractiveness. They called it physiognomy. The idea was that a perfect face reflected a perfect soul. Ironically, some of the same men writing these treatises had never seen their own reflections without squinting through its fogged monocles. Those are that rare creature, symmetry and softness, confidence wrapped in lace, and that makes you a liability. Imagine the whispers: too much rouge, too much laughter, too much light in the eyes. You're drawing attention, and that's suspicious. In a world where modesty was prized, being lovely could make you appear deceitful, even immoral. Here's the mainstream fact. Victorian etiquette manuals actually warned women not to display their charms too freely, as if beauty were a kind of explosive that could go off at any moment. And it wasn't all metaphorical. Lead-based powders used to achieve that fashionable pale complexion often caused paralysis, anemia, and slow poisoning. You'd look radiant right up until your teeth fell out. Now, for a quirky tidbit. Some women reportedly mixed crushed pearls into their facial creams, believing it granted divine beauty. Unfortunately, it mostly granted bankruptcy. Pearls were expensive, and even worse, they didn't blend well, so your cheeks shimmered like damp chalk. While you prayed, no one noticed your pores glowing in candlelight. You glance back at the mirror. There's a superstition murmured by your maid earlier one that claims mirrors can trap part of your soul if you stare too long. You laugh it off, but the Victorians took it seriously. During mourning, families even draped mirrors in black cloth to prevent spirits from getting trapped. You start to wonder whether the same rule applies to beauty. Maybe the reflection is where the danger really begins. The line between admiration and fear was razor thin. Artists painted you as an ethereal vision, then critics accused you of vanity. Preachers thundered about temptation, while poets compared you to dangerous flowers. The word fatal beauty became common, describing women who caused ruin simply by existing. You didn't have to do anything, your face did the damage for you. A soft breeze slips through the cracked window. Outside, the night smells of coal smoke and damp brick. Somewhere in the city, gas lamps flare, illuminating advertisements for soaps, promising the fair English bloom. You know better. Half the ingredients in those soaps could peel wallpaper. It's easy to think beauty was freedom. But for many Victorians, it was a cage lined with lace. The more admired you were, the less control you had. Men wanted to own you, moralists wanted to correct you, and doctors wanted to diagnose you. Too thin, consumption. Too flushed, hysteria. Too independent, madness. There was a medical chart for every shade of female allure. Historians still argue whether this obsession was a symptom of repression or a reaction to industrial chaos, a way for people to cling to ideals while the world modernized around them. Either way, your reflection becomes both shield and target. You perfect your appearance like a soldier polishing armor before battle. And there's humor here, too. Picture a society where men wore three-piece wool suits in summer, yet mocked women for fainting in corsets. Or imagine being told your value depended on having hands so delicate you couldn't open a door. You can't help but chuckle, it's absurd. And yet, the system ran on this absurdity. You take one last look at that wavering mirror. Behind you, the glow of the gaslight makes your hair halo-like, almost saintly. But saints weren't supposed to wear silk or smile too easily. You smooth your dress, take a breath, and step into a world where every glance is a test. Every admirer a potential threat, every reflection a warning. And as the hour grows late, the candle burns lower. Your reflection flickers again, and for a second, swear you see another face, yours, but older, weary from years of careful perfection. Maybe she's whispering advice from the future. Beauty fades, but the danger of being too beautiful never really goes away. The next morning begins with a hiss of gaslight and a faint taste of metal on your tongue. You blink awake beneath layers of lace and linen, feeling the faint powdery residue on your cheeks. You've survived another night of Victorian beauty standards, which, frankly, deserves applause. The room smells faintly of lavender and vinegar, your nightly complexion rinse. Lovely. If you ignore that the vinegar was probably laced with arsenic, you pad across the creaking wooden floor to ward your vanity. The mirror greets you like an old conspirator. On the table, a small pot of bloom of youth, a pale powder with a label that promises eternal freshness. You already know what's in it. White lead, maybe some mercury. A slow, sparkling poison disguised as elegance. The Victorian obsession with pallor ran deep. A pale complexion didn't just mean beauty, it meant purity, wealth, and moral superiority. Your face was a social resume. If it glowed to pink, people assumed you worked outdoors. If it stayed porcelain smooth, they knew you were rich enough to stay inside and let your servants catch the sunlight for you. Here's a mainstream fact. Arsenic wafers were real thing, teeny tablets marketed to women promising clearer skin and brighter eyes. Some were even sold in tins stamped with a royal crest, as if that somehow made them less lethal. In small doses, arsenic caused a ghostly translucence to the skin. In large doses, it caused, well, let's just say your glow became permanent. You dab at your cheeks. The powder smells faintly sweet, like almonds, which is uncomfortably the scent of cyanide. But you don't notice. You're thinking about the party tonight, the ballroom glittering with chandeliers. It's a slow waltz, the eyes that will linger too long. You need to look perfect, no, flawless. The problem is, perfection in this era comes at a high cost. You've heard stories, friends fainting mid-dance from corset tightening, others developing sores from rouge mixed with crushed beetles. Historians still argue whether the women of the time truly believed these concoctions were safe, or whether they simply decided beauty was worth the gamble. The pressure came from every side: art, literature, and even pseudoscience insisted that physical beauty reflected inner virtue. A smooth complexion meant innocence. A blemish hinted at moral decay. Heaven help you if you had freckles. Freckles were practically social misdemeanors, a quirky tidbit from this pale parade. Some women reportedly used vinegar-soaked bread poultices overnight to draw out color. The result? Blotchy cheeks and the faint smell of salad dressing. Romantic, right? And then there was the legend of arsenic spring water. Certain spas in Austria claimed their mineral water contained health-giving doses of arsenic, attracting pilgrims eager to sip themselves beautiful as you smooth the last layer of powder across your face. Your reflection looks less human and more like porcelain. That's the gold lifeless, untouchable beauty. The kind that looks painted rather than lived in. The kind that men praise in sonnets but wouldn't recognize in daylight outside. The street vendors are calling selling ribbons, gloves, and something that smells suspiciously like coal tar. A carriage rattles past, its wheels slicing through puddles left by the morning rain. You watch from your window, careful not to let the sun touch your skin. You've been warned. Sunlight ages, freckles, and most terrifying of RVL's you as mortal. Even Queen Victoria herself was said to prefer the soft glow of lamplight to harsh daylight. And artists like the pre-Raphaelites painted women with skin so pale they seemed carved from wax. That's the kind of beauty you're expected to embody a living statue. Silent, decorative, immaculate. You press your hand to your cheek. It's cold. Maybe too cold. The powder doesn't just hide imperfections. It hides you. You begin to feel like a ghost haunting your own reflection. Somewhere deep down, a quiet thought surfaces. When everyone looks the same shade of fragile white. What happens to individuality? Historians still debate whether this uniform aesthetic was a deliberate tool of control keeping. Women docile and indistinguishable, merely the fashion fever of a nervous empire. You glance toward your dresser and notice a small glass bottle. The liquid inside, shimmering faintly blue. Belladonna drops for the eyes. They're supposed to dilate your pupils, giving you that dyed look of innocence. You've used them once before. The sting was unbearable, the world swimming for hours. But the next day, someone told you your eyes looked enchanting. That was enough to make you consider another drop tonight. Outside, a knock at the door. Your maid, bringing breakfast tea, toast, and a boiled egg. She glances at you, hesitates. "You look pale, miss," she says softly. It's meant as a compliment. You manage a smile, though your lips feel tight beneath their beeswax coating. Beauty has rules here, and you've learned them all by heart. Never blush too brightly, never smile too wide, never appear too healthy. It ruins the illusion of delicacy. The irony, of course, is that sickness itself became fashionable. Tuberculosis, the romantic disease, was idealized for the way it thinned the body and brightened the eyes. Poets swooned over women who looked half in love with death. You sit back, sipping your tea, letting the steam fog the mirror. Somewhere behind that mist is a warning. You just can't see it yet. But the truth is simple. The paler you become, the closer you drift to disappearance. And because life loves a cruel joke. Men at the time were equally obsessed with robust beauty, just in theory. They wrote about rosy cheeks and fresh maidens, courting women who looked one fainting spell away from the afterlife. Contradiction was practically a fashion accessory. You laugh quietly to yourself. It sounds hollow in the small, lace-draped room. Your reflection laughs, too, though you can't tell if she means it. Somewhere, deep in your chest, you feel the faintest pinch, like your lungs disagree with the corset's logic. You breathe shallowly and hope no one notices, because tonight, under those chandeliers, your pale glow will be perfection. People will admire, gossip, maybe envy, and every whisper, every stolen glance will feel like proof that you've done it right. But the cost, that comes later, when the mirror fogs again, and your fingertips tremble. And you start to wonder if all this whiteness is light or something closer to decay. The day of the ball arrives with the slow, syrupy glow of gaslight seeping through lace curtains. You stretch your arms, or at least try to. The corset from last night still presses against your ribs like an argument you can't win. The maid laces you in tighter for the evening, her fingers quick, impersonal, and unrelenting. You hold onto the bedpost, inhale, and feel the air vanish from your lungs. There's beauty in the sound of the laces sliding through eyelids, a rhythmic hiss like a snake preparing to strike. You can't help but laugh softly, though it comes out breathless. Tighter, miss, the maid asks, and you nod, because saying no feels like surrender. The fashion plates insist a 20-inch waist is perfection. You'll settle for 21, but only if you skip dinner. Here's a mainstream fact to make your ribs ache in sympathy. Victorian corsets could compress a woman's waist by 4 to 6 inches, and in extreme cases, even rearrange internal organs. Doctors warned that the stomach could fold in half, the liver deform, and the lungs lose capacity. But those same doctors, mind you, often complimented a patient's fine posture before diagnosing her with female weakness. The mirror reflects something almost supernatural, now a narrow silhouette, perfectly proportioned, impossibly still. You've become an hourglass in motion, a living sculpture. Historians still argue whether women truly believed in the health benefits of corsetry, or whether it was simply one of those cultural illusions everyone upheld together. Too afraid to blink first, the laces tighten again, and the room begins to swim. The maid offers smelling salts, which you wave away. You've read somewhere that fainting gracefully is considered charming. Fainting clumsily, however, ruins the dress. There's a knock at the door, your mother's voice, brisk and approving. Almost ready, dear? Remember to hold your shoulders back. Men notice posture before conversation. Straighten instinctively, ribs protesting. Somewhere, deep beneath the whalebone and satin, your heart thuds like a muffled drum. The corset's purpose, they say, isn't merely fashion. It's discipline made visible. Society loved a woman who seemed controlled physically, morally, and emotionally. The irony, half the population was holding its breath for beauty, while the other half praised them for their composure. And then, the quirky tidbit of the evening. Some corsets were advertised as health corsets, claiming to correct posture and improve digestion. One inventor even fitted his designs with tiny steel springs so wearers could breathe naturally. Naturally, the only people who believed that were the ones selling them. You descend the staircase carefully, clutching the railing. Each step is a negotiation with gravity. The gown swishes like a sigh, the fabric heavy with silk embroidery. The smell of perfume rose and amber mingles with the faint tank of metal stays. When you reach the carriage, you exhale, or try to. It feels like someone else's lungs are inside your chest. London passes in flashes through the window, gas lamps flickering. Couples huddled under umbrellas, the river reflecting the soft glow of 1,000 secrets. You wonder, briefly, if anyone out there feels as trapped as you, too beautiful, mired, and entirely hollowed out by the effort. Inside the ballroom, the air is warm and perfumed, a sea of lace and laughter. Chandeliers spill light across mirrors, doubling everything: the colors, the movement, the illusion. Music curls through the air, violins, sweet and slightly manic. You step onto the floor, and immediately, eyes turn your way. The corset did its job. You're a marvel, a vision of fragile perfection. A gentleman bows. You curtsy, and the room seems to tilt. For a moment, you think it's excitement. Then you realize you've simply run out of air. You recover quickly, though, and the evening goes on. Compliments drift like feathers. Such grace, such elegance, you barely seem to touch the ground. You smile, nod, sip at your water like a bird, pretending you don't see the other women leaning on pillars, pale as their own powder, catching their breath in tiny, stolen gasps. There's something oddly hypnotic about it. All the way beauty in this era comes with both reverence and risk. The corset isn't just an undergarment. It's a metaphor for the entire century. Tight control, rigid decorum, exquisite suffering disguised as poise. Historians still debate whether women wore them out of vanity or submission. Some letters from the time suggest women found comfort in the embrace of structure in a world that gave them none. Others wrote in secret diaries about the constant bruising, the dizziness, the sheer relief of unlacing at night. Truth, as usual, is a little of both. During a pause in the music, you overhear two men near the punch bowl. One says, "A woman's figure should remind a man of discipline." The other laughs. You smile faintly, thinking discipline feels a lot like asphyxiation. There were rebels, of course, surly advocates of rational dress. They proposed looser gowns, breathable fabrics, fewer bones. The newspapers mocked them mercilessly. One satirist quipped that rational women might soon abandon civility altogether and wear trousers. Scandalous. A waltz begins, and your partner leads you into motion. The music lifts, your skirts whirl, and for a few dizzying seconds, you forget the pressure in your ribs. You're floating. Maybe this is what they mean by grace. Not ease, but endurance. As the dance ends, you retreat to a quiet corner, fan fluttering, smile fixed. You watch other women glide past, each as perfectly constrained as you. You wonder how many are secretly counting their breaths. And here's where the humor sneaks in. One woman, desperate for relief, excuses herself, claiming she's overcome by the heat. The maid follows discreetly. Minutes later, you hear a faint popping sound, her corset giving way in the next room. A small rebellion, soft as silk tearing. You can't help but giggle. It earns a few shocked glances, but it's worth it. Laughter feels dangerous, delicious. Later, as the night ends, you sit in the carriage, spine straight as a candlewick, body aching. You can't slouch, not even now. The city rolls by, the lamplight trembling like distant stars. You imagine all those beautiful women, each in her carriage, each wrapped in a private prison of whalebone and silk, dreaming of air dot. When you finally reach home, the maid unlaces you. The first breath is agony and ecstasy at once. You feel your ribs expand, your lungs sting. You realize how starved you've been, not just for air, but for use. The mirror catches you again, flushed, messy, alive, and for a heartbeat, you're more beautiful in this disheveled state than in all the perfection the corset promised. The morning after the ball, your room smells faintly of roses and exhaustion. Your hair, still pinned from the night before, feels heavy enough to have its own gravitational pull. You sit before the mirror, brushing it slowly, each stroke whispering through the air like a sigh. The Victorians adored hair long. Thick, shining locks were more than a sign of health. They were a moral statement. A woman's crowning glory, they said. You might add her crowning curse. The strands glint under the dim light, gold in some places, chestnut in others. You count out 100 strokes, as the fashion magazines recommend. Apparently, it stimulates the scalp, encourages growth, and wards off melancholy. You can't say it's working. Your arms ache, your neck stings, and you suspect melancholy doesn't care how glossy your curls are. Here's the mainstream fact. Victorian women were known to spend hours tending to their hair. Shampooing was usually once every few weeks, with concoctions made from Castile soap, eggs, or even beer. Hair oil, often perfumed with lavender or sandalwood, kept strands smooth and shining. But the real star of the routine was pomade soft wax blended with animal fat and perfumes. Luxurious, yes, but also a paradise for dust, dirt, and occasionally small insects. You reach for your own jar of pomade floral scent, faintly sweet, with a metallic taste beneath. You scoop out a dab, rub it between your palms, and smooth it along the length of your hair. It feels rich, heavy, almost too silky to be real. And that's when you remember a story you heard last week, whispered in the dressing room. A young actress died after using a new brand of pomade. Apparently, it was laced with lead acetate for shine. It's poison in glamorous disguise. Historians still argue whether such cases were urban legends or tragic truth. But it hardly matters. The fear was real enough that some women started making their own mixtures at home. One recipe called for melted bear grease mixed with almond oil and rum. A friend swore by it. Another swore it attracted rats. You tilt your head, admiring the gleam. Your reflection looks healthy, radiant, the kind of hair poets describe as liquid sunlight. Yet you can't ignore the uneasy feeling that your beauty might be glowing a little too brightly, as though lit from within by something dangerous. Hair held power here, not just physical allure, but emotional and spiritual significance. Lovers exchanged locks as keepsakes. Mourners clipped them from the dead to weave into jewelry. A ring of woven hair on someone's finger might carry love or grief, or both. The Victorians didn't separate sentiment from morbidity. They braided them together, literally. A quirky tidbit. Professional hair thieves existed. Yes, truly. They haunted crowded markets and railway stations, ready to snip off a lady's braid with quick scissors and vanish into the crowd. Human hair fetched good money. Wig makers paid handsomely for the finest strands. Imagine, for a second, leaning over to smell a bouquet in the street and rising an inch lighter. Beauty, stolen strand by strand. You shudder and tie your hair up carefully, pinning it beneath a silk net. The style simple but elegant keeps your hair off your neck and away from the city's grime. Yet even this, the act of covering your hair, carries layers of meaning. Too loose and you're immodest. Too severe and you're dour. Every twist of your braid is another test you didn't sign up for in the afternoon. You're invited to tea at a neighbor's house, a respectable matron, fond of gossip and cucumber sandwiches. You arrive punctually, gloves spotless, hat perched just so. The parlor smells of violets and new carpet. Conversation hums softly until someone remarks on your hair. "My dear," she says, "that color, it catches the light beautifully. Is it natural?" The room stills. Compliments in this era often come wrapped in suspicion. Too lovely, and you must have cheated. You smile politely, pretending not to hear the undertone. "Of course," you say, "okay," though you know that natural rarely survives Victorian beauty rituals. Later, on your walk home, you pass a group of young men loitering near a lamppost. Their eyes follow you, lingering. You adjust your hat, walk faster. In this world, admiration can turn on you in an instant. A woman with hair too bright, too long, too noticeable becomes an open invitation for judgment, for rumors, for danger. Historians still debate whether the fascination with female hair was rooted in genuine, aesthetic admiration or something more superstitious. Some claimed that hair carried vital essence, that touching it without permission could steal energy or virtue. You start to think that's not far off. Every strand feels like a thread tied to your freedom. Back in your room, you unpin the curls and let them fall. They cascade over your shoulders, shimmering in the lamplight like a waterfall caught mid-fall. Beautiful, yes, but also burdensome. It takes time, effort, and nerves to maintain something society insists on defining for you. You remember an old saying, "A woman's hair is her glory." You murmur, half amused, in her headache. A laugh escapes you, small but genuine. Humors your rebellion tonight. You imagine how shocked these moralists would be if they knew that one day women would chop their hair short, walk into the wind, unpinned and unashamed. Somewhere in the distance of time, freedom is already brushing its fingers through your curls. You reach again for the brush, running it through slowly, savoring the rhythm. The sound becomes soothing, almost hypnotic. The tension in your shoulders melts a little. You realize, strangely, that amid all this constraint, The ritual of brushing is one of the few moments you truly control. The mirror reflects no audience, no judgment, just you, your breath, and the whisper of hair gliding through bristles. Then, as the brush passes one last time, you catch something peculiar in your reflection, a single strand, shining oddly silver under the light. You pluck it out, twirl it between your fingers. Not age, not stress, but maybe a quiet message from your future self. Beauty fades, but survival requires shedding a few illusions. You smile at that thought, set the brush aside, and blow out the lamp. In the darkness, your hair glows faintly in memory, a cascade of light that belongs to you and to no one else. You wake to the light creeping through lace curtains, a pale shimmer that feels more like fog than morning. Your eyes stinged from the smoke of last night's lamps, and the world swims for a moment before settling into focus, or almost focus. You blink again once, twice, and realize something's off. The edges of your vision blur softly. The room trembling like a watercolor left in the rain. You reach for the small bottle on your vanity, the one marked Belladonna. The label curls at the edges, faintly stained with fingerprints and perfume. 1 drop per eye. The instructions read, for radiant, captivating gaze. You've heard whispers that actresses swear by it, that it makes eyes glisten like midnight pools, but also that it blinds, temporarily or sometimes forever. You unstop it anyway. The Victorians never met a beauty trend they wouldn't flirt with, to the point of self-destruction. And tonight, you're expected at another gathering, this one smaller, more intimate, where dim candlelight will amplify every gleam in your eyes. Here's a mainstream fact. Belladonna, also called deadly nightshade, was indeed used in Victorian cosmetics to dilate pupils, making eyes appear larger and more luminous. The name itself means beautiful woman. The catch: prolonged use could cause blurred vision, dryness, and hallucinations. But to the society pages, that only added mystery. You tilt your head, drop her poised above your lashes, and hesitate. The liquid glints like liquid moonlight. 1 drop falls, cold and sharp. It burns. Tears spring to your eyes, but the effect begins almost instantly. Your pupils widen, dark as onyx, swallowing every hint of color. You blink again, okay, and the world turns dreamlike. Historians still argue whether women truly believed this practice safe, or whether they simply accepted the risk as the cost of standing out. After all, a dangerous beauty was a paradox the Victorians adored, fragile, alluring, doomed. As you blink through the haze, you'll remember another story of an artist's muse, famed for her gaze, who reportedly went blind by 30 from repeated use of the drops. Yet, her portrait still hangs in a gallery somewhere, her painted eyes forever wide, forever hypnotic. Maybe that's the trade, a lifetime of dimming sight for eternal light in someone else's eyes. You lean closer to the mirror. The transformation is eerie. Your pupils, vast and glossy, make your expression unreadable, part innocence, part danger. You could convince anyone of anything with eyes like these, and that's precisely what frightened Victorian society. The idea that a woman could wield power through beauty alone. A quirky tidbit: apothecaries sold belladonna tinctures not only for beauty, but as a remedy for colds, stomach aches, even melancholy. The same plant that could kill you in large doses was bottled as a pick-me-up. Talk about optimism. The maid enters quietly, carrying your breakfast tray. When she catches your gaze, she startles slightly, her hand trembling against the teapot. Your eyes, mist they look. She trails off, unsure whether it's admiration or fear she feels. You smile softly. Different. You offer. She nods, muttering a small prayer under her breath. You can't blame her. In a world obsessed with moral appearances, even your pupils could be scandalous. People believed the eyes revealed the soul. A woman with too much sparkle risked being labeled flirtatious, deceitful, even dangerous. And yet here you are, eyes wide open, daring anyone to look too closely. When evening falls, the air smells of rain and coal smoke. You're in a carriage again, heading to the soiree. The belladonna still lingers, making every gas lamp shimmer like a star and every shadow breathe. The sensation is intoxicating and slightly terrifying. You realize you're half seeing the world, half imagining it inside the parlor. Laughter ripples through the air. Men exchange toasts. Women murmur behind fans. And when you step in, heads turn. It's the eyes. They always notice the eyes first. Someone whispers your name, the syllables drawn out like a secret. You pretend not to notice, but you feel the gazes settling, admiring, analyzing, cataloging. That's the real danger here. The Victorians studied faces like texts. Every flutter of the eyelid, every glance could be interpreted, gossiped about, recorded in journals. A look, one etiquette guide warned, can wound a reputation. You wonder how many women were undone by nothing more than how they looked at someone across the room. Historians still debate whether beauty was seen as power or peril in this era. The truth, both. Women could command attention, but not control its consequences. You see that paradox reflected in every flicker of candlelight on the polished floor. Across the room, gentleman raises his glass. He's been watching you too long, too intently. When you finally meet his gaze, he smiles, half in awe, half in suspicion. You've eyes like no other, he says. They could burn a man alive. You laugh softly, not entirely sure he's joking. You move through the evening like a ghost in silk. The music hums, the laughter fades, and your vision starts to blur again. The belladonna is wearing off, or perhaps it's settling deeper. Every light doubles, every face softens at the edges. You feel both magnificent and fragile, as if one wrong blink could shatter everything. And then the humor of it all hits you, how absurd this pursuit is. Here you are, half blind and lightheaded, risking actual poison to look innocent. Victorians managed to make even blindness fashionable. You can't help but chuckle under your breath, earning a puzzled glance from a nearby lady, who assumes you've just thought of something scandalous. When you return home later that night, you remove your gloves, wash your hands, and glance once more into the mirror. Your pupils are still wide, your irises dark enough to swallow secrets. The reflection feels unfamiliar, someone else's beauty borrowed for a night. You think of all the other women across drawing rooms and theaters, tipping bottles of belladonna into their eyes, hoping for that dangerous sparkle. How many of them saw less and less until the world itself faded into shadow? The lamp flickers low. You blink again, and for a heartbeat, everything goes black. It's only a moment, but it's enough. You press your palm to your chest and laugh quietly. You survived another Victorian beauty ritual. Barely dot outside, rain begins to fall, soft and steady. It sounds like applause or maybe warning. You can't tell anymore. The rain from last night hasn't stopped. It's still whispering against your window panes, soft and relentless, like the city's breathing. You rise, dress slowly, and stand before the glass, peering out into the pale, fog-wrapped morning. London looks half asleep, horses clopping through puddles, street vendors lighting lamps that the mist immediately swallows. You're supposed to go out today, to a fitting, and then to a cafe with friends, but something inside you hesitates, because lately you've noticed a new kind of danger. Not the chemical kind, not the poison hidden in powders, but something quieter. The stare, the public gaze, the way beauty draws attention that doesn't ask permission. You slip on your gloves and bonnet anyway. The maid tucks a small parasol under your arm. To keep the soot off, miss, she says, but you both know it's also a kind of shield. The streets aren't kind to women who stand out. The moment you step outside, the cold air bites. A carriage rolls past, splashing a fan of dirty water at your hem. You flinch, then laugh, so very London. messy, and indifferent. You walk along the cobblestones, keeping your chin down. Around you, the crowd moves and waves clerks, beggars, flower girls, men in top hats gliding like shadows through the fog. Here's a mainstream fact. By the mid-Victorian era, London had more than 2 million inhabitants and a booming tabloid press hungry for stories about beauty, scandal, and moral decay. Newspapers published sketches of fashionable ladies and gossip columns describing who had the fairest complexion at the opera. Single mention could make or destroy a woman's reputation. You pause at a newspaper stand. The headlines shout of politics and empire, but the smaller text whispers about some actress, some heiress seen too often in male company. Her name is half hidden, but the implication isn't. Beauty invited attention, and attention demanded judgment. You walk faster. The parasol shields you, but not entirely. A group of men outside a cafe glance your way. One whistles softly. Another murmurs something you can't quite catch, though the tone is clear enough. You pretend not to hear, but your steps quicken. In this era, a public woman, any woman alone, a curiosity at best, a scandal at worst. Historians still argue whether the Victorian obsession with modesty truly protected women or simply disguised control. The angel in the house ideal demanded that you be visible enough to admire, invisible enough to avoid desire. A paradox so tight it squeezes the breath from you like a corset for the soul. You duck into a shop to catch your breath. The bell over the door jingles faintly, and warm air greets you, smelling of starch and lavender. It's a dressmaker studio, lined with bolts of silk and mannequins pinned into perfection. The seamstress looks up, smiling. "Ah, miss," she says, "we were just finishing your gown." She draws back a curtain to reveal pale blue satin, trimmed with lace delicate as frost. Its exquisite and instantly terrifying. You can already imagine how it will catch every eye in the room. Perhaps a darker shade. You suggest weakly, but the seamstress shakes her head. "Oh no, miss. This is the color of angels. You'll be the envy of all London." You swallow the protest. Envy is the last thing you need as she pins the hem. She chatters about clients who's rising in society, who's fallen out of favor. Beauty and ruin often appear in the same sentence. She lowers her voice. "Did you hear about Miss Lovell? Such a face, they say. Painters beg to capture it. But too many admirers. Her father sent her away to the country for her safety." You nod politely, though your stomach twists. You've heard that story before, in one form or another. For her safety usually means for society's comfort. A quirky tidbit from that same world. Women who walked alone in public sometimes carried chaperone cards, signed by family members to prove their respectability if questioned by police. It sounds absurd now, but in a society where appearance was everything, even walking down the wrong street could invite scandal or worse. A label you could never wash away. You pay for the dress and step back into the fog. The air smells faintly of coal smoke and damp wool. Somewhere nearby, a church bell tolls. You find yourself thinking of the countless women hidden behind curtains, painting their faces pale and lowering their eyes, hoping to be admired, but not too much, noticed, but not followed. Then, the irony hits you. Men in this era wrote endless poems about women who didn't exist, silent, perfect, unearthly, and then blamed real women for not living up to the fantasy. You chuckle softly, the sound half a sigh. Humor, once again, is your lifeline as you near the cafe. You spot your friends through the window, 3 ladies perched at a marble table, teacups poised midair like props in a play. You join them, smile, sip your tea. Conversation flows, but under it comes a constant awareness. Who's watching? Who's listening? One of your friends leans close. "Have you seen the caricature in Punch?" She whispers. "They've drawn Lady Beaumont with lips like sausages. Imagine, she hasn't left her house since." You laugh. though uneasily. The Victorian press turned ridicule into entertainment long before social media was invented. You glance at your reflection in the window, faint against the drizzle. The belladonna from last night has faded, but your eyes still hold that strange gleam. Outside, a passerby slows, glances in. You shift slightly, turning away. Historians still debate whether Victorian women feared or fed the public gaze. Some thrived on attention, manipulating it like currency. Others withdrew entirely, retreating into novels, diaries, or illness. The line between spectacle and safety was razor-dash thin. You finish your tea, excuse yourself, and step back into the rain. The street glistens, mirrors shimmering under your feet. You hold your parasol steady, head high. Walk in the tightrope between visibility and invisibility. Somewhere behind you, laughter echoes light, careless, masculine. You don't turn around. You've learned that beauty in this world isn't armor. It's a target painted in gold leaf. By the time you reach home, the fog has thickened to a silvery wall. You close the door behind you and lean against it, heartbeat slowing. Inside, it's quiet. The only gaze left is your own, reflected in the dark mirror. And even that feels slightly dangerous. You sleep late the next morning, lulled by the soft hiss of rain on slate roofs. The dreams are vivid faces in candlelight, eyes widening like dark moons, a whisper that beauty is both gift and trap. When you finally wake, the clock is striking 11, and your head feels stuffed with fog. You stretch, yawn, realize your gloves are still damp from yesterday. The maid leaves your breakfast on a tray tea, toast, a soft-boiled egg, but your appetite's elsewhere. You sit by the window, gazing at the city below. The fog has begun to lift, revealing a jumble of chimneys and rooftops. From up here, it looks almost serene. But you know better. Beneath those rooftops lie stories, some gilded, some grim about how beauty can twist a woman's fate. Today, you're going to see one of those stories in person. A friend of yours, Clara, works at a portrait studio. You've been invited to sit for a photograph in honor, she says, a chance to preserve your image for posterity. You laugh softly. The Victorians love that phrase, though it really means for gossip and display. Still, curiosity wins. The streets bustle as you step outside. Vendors call out, horse carts rattle past, and you find yourself clutching your skirts as you cross puddles that smell faintly of soot and iron. The studio sits above a milliner's shop. It's 3 narrow flights of creaking stairs, each step echoing like the countdown to revelation. Inside, the room smells of chemicals and velvet. The light is thin, but carefully directed through tall glass panes. A great wooden camera looms in the corner, draped with black cloth. Clara greets you with her usual grin, cheeks smudged with dust. You'll love it, she insists. No one forgets their first portrait. You're not so sure. Here's a mainstream historical fact. By the 1860s, photography studios dotted every major city in Britain. Portraits became the new social currency. The wealthier the sitter, the grander the posed silk gowns, marble columns, hand-painted backdrops of pastoral bliss. Beauty, captured on glass, was proof of class dot. Clara adjusts the drapery behind you. Try to look serene, she says, stepping back to study the frame. Not happy to modern. Think of tragedy, but elegant. You nearly snort out loud. The Victorians had a strange love affair with melancholy. A little sadness was fashionable as long as it was photogenic. You settle into the chair. The camera's lens stares like a single, unblinking eye. Clara ducks under the cloth, fiddling with the plates. Hold very still, she murmurs. Any movement will blur you. You freeze, every muscle tight. The seconds stretch. The silence grows heavy, only the faint ticking of a clock filling the space. You can almost hear your own pulse. And then something unexpected happens. You realize how vulnerable this feels. To be frozen, watched, preserved without motion or defense. It's the same stillness demanded by society itself. Perfect posture, calm expression. No trace of rebellion. Historians still argue whether Victorian portraiture empowered women by immortalizing their image or imprisoned them in an ideal. A photograph could make you famous, soar, mark you forever as vain, immoral, too visible. When the exposure finally ends, Clara exhales, relieved. That's it, she says. Now we wait. You rise, legs tingling, and wander the room. On the walls hang dozens of other portraits. Stern matrons, radiant debutantes, actresses gazing into eternity. You notice something peculiar all. The eyes seem to follow you. A quirky tidbit. Some Victorians believed photographs captured not just a likeness, but part of the soul. That's why early mourners often photographed the dead, arranging them to look peacefully asleep. A portrait was a bridge between life and memory and, occasionally, between comfort and horror. You shiver slightly, imagining your own photograph someday outliving you, displayed on a mantle while whispers filled the air. She was beautiful, but it brought her trouble. Clara returns with a glass plate, the faint image beginning to emerge. See, she says proudly, you look ethereal. You peer closer and almost don't recognize yourself. The exposures soften your features, blurring you into ghostly perfection. Your eyes glimmer like faint stars, and your smile, barely there, looks secretive, distant. It's beautiful, yes, but unsettling. You appear unreal, as though the camera has stripped away your warmth and left only your myth. You can't help but joke softly. If I'm to haunt anyone, at least I'll do it tastefully. Clara laughs, assuming you're teasing, but the chill in your spine lingers. Later, you walk home carrying the photograph wrapped in paper. It feels oddly heavy, as though it contains more than just an image. You think of all the women whose faces now live on glass frozen in beauty, silenced in time. Some of them probably believed those portraits would grant immortality. Others might have known better, that eternity comes at the cost of ever being truly seen. That night, you place the photograph on your vanity. By lamplight, it seems to move, the faint shine on your eyes flickering like thought. You reach out and trace the outline of your face through the paper. How strange to see yourself as the world sees you, idealized and unknowable. You imagine future generations unwrapping this image, marveling at the elegance, never suspecting the tension behind the pose. They'll think beauty was effortless. They won't feel the stiffness in your shoulders, the fear of judgment, okay? The absurdity of holding still for eternity. Outside, thunder rolls in the distance. You blow out the lamp, the afterimage of your portrait still hovering behind your eyelids. In the dark, you whisper to yourself, half amused, half resigned. So this is how beauty survives, by pretending it never flinches. The thunder answers, low and slow, as if agreeing. You wake to the faint scent of oil paint and varnish drifting through your window. Somewhere nearby, an artist is already at work, another muse, immortalized. The thought makes you smile sleepily, though it's tinged with unease. Painters in this era are the alchemists of beauty. They capture faces, smooth away flaws, and in doing so, rewrite a woman's identity. You've agreed, reluctantly, to visit one today. He's been seeking new inspiration, as the letter put it, and your name came recommended. You're not sure whether to feel flattered or hunted. The carriage rattles through narrow streets, lined with gas lamps still flickering from the night before. The air smells faintly of turpentine and rain. When you arrive at the Stew-War converted attic near Bloomsbury, you're greeted by canvases stacked like sentinels, and a man with paint under his fingernails, who greets you as though he's known you all his life. You're exactly what I imagined, he says, which of course means you're exactly what I need to imagine. He shows you to a chair near the window, where the morning light slices through dust motes like gold ribbons. Sit here. Don't smile. I want the truth of your face. You almost laugh at that. Truth in portraiture, in Victorian art. That's like asking a corset to breathe. Here's a mainstream historical fact. In the mid to late 19th century, female beauty became a recurring obsession in art. Pre-Raphaelite painters, in particular, idealized pale, melancholy women with tumbling hair and distant gazy symbols of fragile purity or dangerous temptation. Their muses, often working-class girls or mistresses, were both adored and discarded, painted into legend and forgotten in life. You sit still as the painter sketches quick outlines, his charcoal whispering against the canvas. The room hums faintly with tension, the kind that comes from too much silence and too much watching. You're aware of every breath, every flick of his gaze. The clock ticks loud enough to make your pulse match it. He studies your face, muttering about balance, light, and soul. You wonder if he says the same to every sitter, and whether he believes it. You also wonder how many women have sat here before you, surrendering their faces to his version of beauty. Historians still argue whether the pre-Raphaelites celebrated feminine power or consumed it. Some say their art rebelled against Victorian stiffness, showing women as complex, emotive, even dangerous. Others claim they merely replaced one cage with another this time, made of light and myth. When he pauses to mix paints, you glance around the studio. On the walls hang unfinished portrait faces that seem alive yet slightly off, like dreams caught mid-breath. One woman's hair glows red as flame, another's eyes shimmer green, haunting. You recognize one Lizzie Siddle, the famous muse who posed for Ophelia and nearly froze to death in a bathtub filled with cold water for the sake of art. You shiver involuntarily. A quirky tidbit. When Siddle caught pneumonia during that session, the artist's father refused to pay her medical bill, insisting models are replaceable. Later, she became his wife, then his tragedy dying young, immortalized as both saint and cautionary tale. The painter clears his throat, dragging your gaze back to him. Look toward the light, he says softly. Yes, that's it. You have that? Unguarded sorrow. I can't paint often enough. You bite back a laugh. Unguarded sorrow. That's what happens when you sit in a corset for 3 hours without tea. Still, you hold the pose. The light shifts, shadows move, and you begin to drift half into daydream, half into numbness. You imagine yourself on the finished canvas, serene, unknowable, perfect. No one will see the boredom, the ache in your spine, the twinge of irony at being called timeless in a room that smells of decay. Do you believe beauty can be dangerous? He asks suddenly. The question startles you. You glance up, but his tone is curious, not mocking. Of course, you say. You're proof of it. He blinks, then laughs, delighted. Ah, you understand? He murmurs, keeps painting. You study him for a while, the furrowed brow, the slight tremor in his hand, the intensity that borders on hunger. Beauty, for him, is both muse and disease. You suspect he couldn't live without it, yet it's what slowly consumes him. The hours pass. By late afternoon, he steps back, exhausted, and gestures for you to stand. Come see, he says. You approach the canvas, heart flickering between dread and curiosity. There you are, sort of. The painting captures your likeness, but not yourself. You look older, softer, more tragic. The iris are pools of melancholy, glinting like stormlight. It's stunning. It's wrong. It's beautiful. You manage, because that's what's expected. But inside, you feel a chill. This version of you will live longer than you will, and she never blinked. The painter smiles, satisfied. You'll be remembered, he says, as if that's a comfort. Later, as you leave, the street air feels like freedom. You breathe deeply, the scent of rain and horses and chimney smoke, reminding you that you're still flesh. Still fleeting. Historians still debate how much agency the muses truly had. Whether they chose to be icons or were simply chosen. Some letters suggest pride, others regret. You suspect both could be true at once. You stop by a shop window and catch your reflection, tired, alive, imperfect. You grin, despite yourself. No artist can paint that expression, and that, you decide, is its own kind of victory. On the walk home, you pass a street vendor selling cheap lithographs of famous paintings. You spot one of the pre-Raphaelite faces pale, lovely, doomed, printed, and sold for a penny. The irony makes you laugh out loud, startling the vendor. He frowns, muttering something about ladies these days. You tuck your laughter into your glove like a secret weapon. The city hums around you, and for once, its gaze feels bearable. Because tonight, you realize something strange. The danger of being too beautiful isn't just being seen, it's being defined. And you, at least for now, are still rewriting yourself. By morning, the smell of oil paint still clings to your sleeves. You try to brush it off, but the scent has a stubbornness all its own, half memory, half warning. Downstairs, your maid hums as she opens the shutters. The first rays of daylight cut through the mist like pale blades, revealing the room's faded wallpaper and the faint glimmer of your new portrait leaning against the wall. You glance at it as you sip your tea. Even now, it feels like the painted version of you is watching her calm serenity, mocking your real, sleepy expression. "You're too perfect," you whisper, setting the cup down. You'd never spill tea on yourself. But today isn't about portraits. It's about reputation, because beauty in Victorian society doesn't just shape how others see you. It dictates what you're allowed to be. You're invited this afternoon to a luncheon with Lady Venn, a woman whose influence can make or break any debutante's season. The gossip columns call her the gatekeeper of grace. You've never met her, but you've heard plenty. Her drawing room is both court and courtroom. Her smile both compliment and test. You dress carefully, eyed muslin, subtle jewelry, a touch of lavender water at the wrists. Not too striking, not too simple. The Victorian woman's paradox, to appear effortless while managing every atom of appearance. The carriage rattles through the cobblestone streets, heart matching its rhythm. Outside, London blurs into soot and rainlight. By the time you arrive, your nerves hum like a taut violin string. Lady Venn's home is a masterpiece of restraint cream walls, gilt frames, no dust daring to settle. She greets you with a look that scans, assesses, weighs. "My dear," she says, voice smooth as cream but cold as marble. "I've heard interesting things about you." You smile. That's never a comforting opening. Here's a mainstream historical fact. In the Victorian upper classes, a woman's reputation was her entire currency. A single rumor could exile her from society, while a well-placed compliment from the right hostess could elevate her overnight. The gossip network was faster than the telegraph and infinitely more lethal. Lady Venn gestures for you to sit. The other guests are already assembled, 3 women and a man who looks like he's allergic to silence. The tea is poured, the conversation polite, but under the surface. There's a current of competition, sharp enough to cut lace. Someone mentions your recent portrait. "Ah, yes," Lady Venn says, eyes glinting. "I've heard it's haunting." You can't tell if it's praise or a warning. "How curious," she continues, stirring her tea, "how beauty can turn the simplest face into a spectacle. I do wonder whether artists exaggerate what isn't truly there." You take a slow sip of tea before answering. "Perhaps," you say softly. But then again, society does the same, doesn't it? There's a brief pause. One of the ladies coughs delicately into her napkin. The man grins behind his cup. Lady Venn's lips twitch the smallest hint of amusement or challenge. "Clever girl," she murmurs. But cleverness is like perfume. Too much, and people start to suspect poison. Now, you laugh lightly, as though she's teasing. But you hear the subtext clearly. In this world, wit is dangerous if you wear it too openly. Historians still argue whether Victorian social etiquette was meant to protect women or pacify them. Every rule when to speak, how to smile, how far to lower your eyes was a way of controlling narrative. Too much beauty. Suspicious. Too little. Forgettable. The perfect woman was a myth, and the punishment for failing it was isolation. Lady Van changes the subject, launching into a story about a duchess who looked too well in widow's black. Everyone laughs at the scandal, though the laughter has an edge. You smile, but inside, you imagine that poor duchess grieving and still being scolded for having good bone structure. Quirky tidbit: Victorians genuinely believed that grief should make a woman visibly unattractive. Manuals on mourning etiquette advised avoiding excessive adornment. Its beauty during bereavement might suggest moral deficiency. You could weep beautifully, but you weren't supposed to look beautiful while doing it. As dessert is served delicate pastries, shaped like Rose's lady. Van turns back to you. Tell me, my dear, she says, do you enjoy being admired? It's a trap, of course. There's no safe answer. Too much honesty in your vein. Too little in your coy. You choose the middle path. I enjoy being remembered kindly, you say. Her eyes narrow just enough to show she's intrigued. A diplomatic answer. You'll survive London yet. You take another sip of tea, and the faintest smile touches your lips. You probably won't survive it unchanged. But surviving at all feels like victory. After the luncheon, you walk home through Hyde Park, needing air. The sky is gray-blue, streaked with the faintest sun. Children chase each other along the paths, their laughter sharp as bells. You spot a young woman sitting alone by the lake, face hidden by her bonnet. A man passes, glances at her, then another. She tenses visibly. You recognize that stiffness, the fear of being looked at and looked through at the same time. You wish you could tell her it doesn't get easier, but you learn to hold your gaze like armor. Historians still debate how much of Victorian modesty was sincere and how much was performance. You're fairly certain it was both an elaborate theater where everyone knew their lines, but no one dared leave the stage. By the time you reach your house, the sky has deepened to dusk. You light a lamp and catch your reflection again in the window, half in light, half in shadow. You wonder what Lady Van saw today. A threat, a curiosity, a potential ally. You unpin your hair, feeling the relief in your scalp as each curl loosens. Too beautiful, you murmur to your reflection. It's just another way of saying too visible. And maybe that's the truest danger of all being seen so sharply that you disappear behind the image. Still, as you blow out the candle and darkness claims the room, you smile, because somewhere beneath the layers of expectation and performance, you still belong to yourself. And that, for now, feels revolutionary enough. The next morning dawns pale and almost mercifully quiet. You lie in bed listening to the faint creak of the floorboards as the maid builds the fire. It's a steady tick of the clock, the occasional clip-clop of hooves outside. The rhythm of it all almost feels soothing until you remember that tonight there's another invitation on your dresser. A masquerade. The card is embossed in gold, sealed with a wax insignia shaped like a swan. You turn it over in your hands, feeling the texture of the paper, the weight of expectation it carries. Masquerades are supposed to offer freedom, magnanimity. It's mystery, but in Victorian society, even masks come with rules. You rise, stretch, and move toward the window. Outside, London's fog curls around lampposts like restless ghosts. You can almost feel the city waking its perfume of smoke, ink, and ambition. You think about how this world never truly sleeps. It just changes costume. Later, as your maid helps lace your corset, you can't resist a wry comment. I'm fairly certain if beauty doesn't kill me, the whalebone will. She chuckles nervously, tightening the ribbons. You do look splendid, miss, she says, though she doesn't meet your eyes. Splendid. Yes, but at what cost? Here's a mainstream historical fact. Victorian fashion wasn't just about appearance. It was a social language. The corset signified discipline, modesty, and class. Waistlines, as small as 18 inches, were considered ideal. Yet medical reports from the period describe fainting, organ compression, even miscarriages attributed to tight lacing. Still, women persisted because a properly corseted figure was proof of self-control, okay? And self-control was proof of virtue. You take one shallow breath, then another, and smile through the dizziness. Perfect, you whisper, though your ribs ache by late afternoon. The dress arrives a masterpiece of emerald satin and jet beading. When you move, it shimmers like water under moonlight. The mask, too, is exquisite. Black lace, anched with tiny pearls. You hold it up, studying your reflection. Behind the mask, your eyes look mysterious, almost dangerous. You wonder if that's how power feels to be seen and unseen at once as dusk falls. Its carriage carries you through gaslit streets. The lamps flicker gold against the fog, turning the city into a dreamscape. Inside the grand hall, music spills like champagne waltzes and laughter and the soft rustle of silk. Candles glow in mirrored sconces, doubling the illusion of endless light. You step inside and are instantly swallowed by the spectacle. Faces gleam behind feathers, jewels, velvet masks. Laughter flutters like moth wings. For the first time in days, you feel strangely light-free, even. A man in a silver half-mask approaches, bowing. "May I have the pleasure?" You nod, and he leads you onto the floor. The music swells, and you spin beneath chandeliers that look like captured constellations. For a few minutes, the world blurs beautifully. The constraints of rank, name, reputation, they dissolve into rhythm. It's only when he leans close, murmuring, "I think I know who you are," that the spell cracks. You pull back slightly, though your smile doesn't falter. "Do you? Those eyes," he says softly. "I've seen them in a portrait." Ah, there it is, again visibility as a curse. You laugh gently, hiding the flicker of unease. "Then I mustn't look at you too long, or you'll start imagining ghosts." Historians still argue whether Victorian masquerades truly subverted social order or reinforced it. The anonymity allowed flirtation, even rebellion, but only within the safety of pretense. Remove the mask, and the same hierarchies snapped back into place. The music ends, and you curtsy before slipping away. You wander through the hall, observing the dancers, women dazzling in silk, men gleaming with medals and arrogance. You notice how easily beauty here becomes performance. Each gesture rehearsed, each glance calibrated. It's theater disguised as spontaneity. You pause by a marble column and overhear two women whispering, "She's lovely," but too forward, always speaking her mind. Ah, yes, and worse men seem to listen. You bite back a laugh. In this world, being heard is always a scandal, a quirky tidbit in some elite circles. Women known for their beauty were deliberately excluded from certain gatherings, not for impropriety, but to prevent distraction. One hostess reportedly claimed, "Beauty is best enjoyed at a distance. Like fireworks or madness, you drift toward the balcony, needing air." Outside, the night is cool and velvet dark. The fog glows faintly in the lamplight, and the hum of the city feels far away. You remove your mask, breathing deeply. For the first time in hours, you can exhale fully. Behind you, footsteps approach. It's Lady Ven. Her own mask dangles loosely from her wrist. "You shouldn't stand alone," she says mildly. "People might think you're hiding something." You smile. "Isn't that the point of a masquerade?" She studies you for a moment, then laughs a soft, genuine sound. "Perhaps you're right. But remember, my dear, masks are meant to be temporary. Some people forget to take them off." You nod slowly, sensing the layers beneath her words. Maybe she knows more about such masks than she lets on. As she leaves, you gaze down at the street below, carriages like beetles of light crawling through the mist. You think of all the women behind these glowing windows, performing their parts with perfect grace, even when their corsets cut like knives. Historians still debate whether Victorian women were complicit in their own confinement or simply masters of endurance. You suspect it's both resistance disguised as obedience. Power hidden behind politeness. When you return inside, the ballroom feels brighter, almost garish. You replace your mask and blend back into the crowd, but something inside you has shifted. You're no longer performing. You're observing, seeing the fragile machinery of appearances for what it is. As the clock strikes midnight, you slip away unnoticed. The streets outside are quiet, slick with rain. You lift your skirts and walk home on foot, the night cool against your flushed skin. At your door, you pause. The mask hangs from your hand, its lace glimmering faintly. You consider throwing it away, but instead, you hang it on the wall, a reminder. Beauty might invite danger, but disguise can be deadlier still. You blow out your lamp and crawl into bed, breathing at last without restraint. Let them look, you murmur to the dark. Just not too closely. The morning after the masquerade feels oddly quiet, as if the entire city has drawn a deep, collective breath and is waiting to exhale. You sit at your vanity, hair unpinned, eyes ringed faintly with fatigue, but still alight from the night before. Your mask lies beside the brush, a ghost of the woman you pretended to be. The newspapers have already arrived, folded neatly on the silver tray. You reach for one absently, expecting politics and weather, but your gaze snags on something else, your name. Right there, printed in ink that smells faintly of scandal. A mysterious lady in green captured attention at last night's masquerade. Her beauty, haunting and unrestrained, drew whispers from every corner. Could this be the same young woman recently immortalized by the celebrated portraitist? You stop reading. Your tea grows cold, so it's happened. You've become news. Here's a mainstream historical fact. By the late 19th century, the rise of mass printing turned society gossip into a form of entertainment. Illustrated papers published sketches of parties, describing dresses, jewelry, even facial expressions. A woman's reputation could circulate faster than she did, and there was no undo button, no way to reclaim a rumor once it inked itself into public imagination. You lean back, exhaling slowly. The words aren't cruel, not yet, but they carried that dangerous shimmer of fascination. Once the papers decide you're interesting, they rarely let go. The maid hovers in the doorway, uncertain. Shall I take it away, miss? You shake your head. Leave it. You want to see what kind of creature the world is building from your reflection. Later that afternoon, invitations begin to arrive more than usual. Dinners, salons, informal teas. Everyone suddenly wants a glimpse of the woman behind the mask. You know this pattern well. The rise before the inevitable backlash. In Victorian society, fame and infamy share the same carriage. By evening, curiosity outweighs caution. You accept one invitation, a private gathering hosted by Lord Meryton, a notorious collector of curiosities, both artistic and human. His townhouse glows like a lantern in the fog. Inside, it's a carnival of conversation. Actors quoting Shakespeare, explorers boasting of pyramids, and poets who look as though they haven't slept since the Crimean War. Ah, Lord Meryton booms as you arrive, the muse herself. Come, we've been discussing whether beauty is born or constructed. You'll settle the argument for us. You laugh softly. If I could answer that, I'd be selling sermons, not smiles. He grins, pleased, spoken like a philosopher in silk. He offers you wine, rich, dark, and sweeter than expected. The room hums with attention. You feel their eyes on you, measuring, imagining, inventing. Historians still argue whether Victorian women courted attention out of vanity or survival. The truth lies somewhere murky. Visibility could ruin you, but invisibility erased you. The art was in balancing, both shining just brightly enough to be remembered, but not enough to burn. Across the room, a woman in crimson catches your gaze. She's older, elegant, her expression tinged with knowing amusement. She drifts over, her perfume faintly spicy. They'll make you into a myth, she murmurs, voice low enough that only you can hear. It starts with admiration and ends with accusation. Don't give them too much truth. They prefer the illusion. Study, her face beautiful still, though her eyes hold the exhaustion of someone who's been through this dance before. Did they turn you into one? You ask quietly. She smiles, sad and sharp. Oh, darling, I helped them. Then, with a clink of her glass, she vanishes back into the crowd. A quirky tidbit. Some women in Victorian high society employed what newspapers called reputation managers. These were unofficial fixers' maids, secretaries, even journalists who leaked flattering gossip or buried unpleasant truths. Scandal wasn't always accidental. Sometimes it was curated like fashion. You stand near the piano as someone begins to play a haunting waltz that ripples through the room. The melody feels strangely familiar, like memory draped in silk. You find yourself staring at the candles reflected in the polished floor, thinking about the older woman's warning. What does it mean to become myth? To have people speak your name in tones of awe and suspicion. You think of your portrait again that painted you, serene and unreachable. That's what they want, a beautiful cipher. Historians still debate whether Victorian fascination with fallen women was moral outrage or voyeurism disguised as virtue. Artists painted them, writers romanticized them, and society condemned them all while quietly craving the thrill of their defiance. Beauty without obedience was always dangerous because it hinted at freedom. As the evening stretches on, conversation turns sharper, livelier, fueled by too much wine and curiosity. Tell us, a journalist calls out, what's it like to be the most talked about woman in London? You smile thinly. It's rather like being a painting. Everyone stares, but no one listens. Laughter ripples through the room, half admiring, half nervous. Someone applauds. Someone else whispers something that sounds like envy. You feel the warmth rise in your cheeks, the heat of exposure. You excuse yourself and step out onto the balcony, gulping the cool air. Below, the street glows faintly, carriages gliding through mist. Somewhere in the distance, Big Ben tolls. You grip the railing, letting the vibration of the city settle into your bones. Dangerous, you murmur. Not because of what I am, but because of what they see. The door opens behind you. It's Lord Meryton again, his expression more curious than kind. You have no idea how valuable mystery is, he says. Keep them wondering, and they'll never stop talking. Hugh turned toward him, smile soft but sharp. And if they stop, A shrugs. Then you'll vanish. London forgets quickly. Later, when you return home, you place the newspaper beside your mirror. Your reflection and the printed words stare back at each other. It's equally unreal. You laugh under your breath, half amusement, half fatigue. You wanted to be seen, you tell yourself. And now you're everywhere but in your own skin. The lamp sputters out, leaving only your faint silhouette against the glass. Somewhere, in another house, someone is probably reading your name aloud, imagining you as something you're not. And that, you think, might be the most Victorian danger of all, becoming famous for being imagined. You dream in headlines that night. Words drift through the fog of your sleep. Temptress, muse. Victim titles given and taken by strangers you'll never meet. When you wake, the morning light feels too bright, too sharp, like truth trying to force its way in. Your maid brings tea and toast, but she hesitates before leaving. Miss, she says quietly, they're saying there was an incident. You blink the sleep from your eyes. An incident. She nods, lowering her voice. That actress, Miss Havers, the one everyone said looked just like you. She's been found well. Her words trail off "I found." You don't need her to finish. The word lands with the soft finality of a curtain closing. You sit in silence for a long moment, listening to the city beyond the window, the bells, the wheels, the murmurs of life that never stop for death. Here's a mainstream historical fact. The Victorian press adored stories of beautiful victims. When a woman of notice, especially one admired for her looks, died tragically, Newspapers lingered on her appearance, often describing her with unsettling poetry. Pale, serene, angelic words meant to comfort readers while turning her into an object. Once again, you whisper the name, Miss Havers, and picture her face, her laughter, her perfect curls, the way she always seemed to catch light, like glass. You remember how critics once called her too beautiful to be clever, as though wit might crack the surface of LOVELINESS. By midday, the streets are humming with rumor. The word murder slides between parasols and cab doors like perfume sweet, sickening, everywhere. You overhear snippets as you pass. They say it was jealousy. No, a secret admirer. I heard she refused someone powerful. You walk faster, pulling your shawl tighter. Beauty again as bait, curse. Historians still argue whether Victorian fascination with female murder victims came from empathy or something darker, a collective ritual of control. The more the public mourned these women, the less they had to confront the system that endangered them. Sympathy became spectacle. That evening, you light a candle and unfold the newspaper. The headline stretches across the page. The Fallen Star of Drury Lane. You read in silence, each word turning colder. Her body discovered in her dressing room, her jewelry untouched, her expression peaceful. They never say peaceful for men. You notice how every line circles back to her looks, as if even in death she must perform. And then you see Ida, line that makes your blood prickle. Several witnesses noted a striking resemblance between Miss Havers and a certain lady recently painted by the fashionable artist. Mr. Linton, you drop the paper. The candle flame quivers. So it begins again, the merging of identities, beauty blurring boundaries until the living and the dead share a face. Later that night, a carriage stops outside your house. A knock follows, polite but firm. You open the door to find a man in a long coat, hat, brim low. Detective Inspector Harrow, he says. His voice is even clipped. Apologies for the late hour. I understand you knew Miss Havers? You nod, stepping aside. The hallway feels too narrow, the air too still. He studies you as though memorizing the edges of your silhouette. You do resemble her, he says at last. Uncannily, I've been told. You reply, forcing calm. She had admirers, he continues. Dozens. Some persistent. If you receive letters, calls, or gifts anything unusual, please inform us immediately. You almost laugh. Unusual gifts are practically a fashion trend. He doesn't smile. Be careful, miss. Beauty draws attention, and attention well. You've read the papers. After he leaves, you lock the door and sink into a chair. The mirror across the room catches your reflection, your face pale in the candlelight, eyes hollow. For the first time, you wish you could step out of your own features, abandon them like an old costume, a quirky tidbit after the infamous Whitechapel murders. Some London women wore fake bruises or dirt on their faces when walking home at night, hoping to look less tempting. Beauty was both shield and target, and some chose invisibility for safety. You lean forward, staring at your reflection until it blurs. Is that what it takes? You whisper. To be safe, you must be unremarkable. Historians still debate how much the Victorian obsession with purity contributed to this pattern of peril. Was it that society couldn't separate beauty from sin, or that it secretly didn't want to? After all, every angel story is sold better when it ended in ruin. The next morning brings rain as steady, relentless drizzle that turns streets to silver and umbrellas to blooms of black. You walk to the gallery, drawn by something you can't quite name. The moment you step inside, the smell of varnish and oil paint wraps around you. There, on the far wall, hangs the portrait. Your portrait. People cluster around it, whispering. One woman dabs her eyes. Another murmurs, "It's uncanny, isn't it? Like she's still watching us." They're talking about Miss Havers, not you. The crowd has already rewritten the story. The painting now belongs to the dead. You step closer until your reflection merges with the brushstrokes. You and she leave and gonna become one indistinct figure, half pigment, half flesh. The gallery air feels too thick, too heavy with pity. You turn away, heart pounding, and make for the exit. Outside, the rain hits your face, cold and sharp. The city blurs behind streaks of water, as though trying to wash itself clean of its obsessions. You whisper into the wet air, they'll forget her by next week, but you know better. They'll remember just enough to fear you too. When you finally reach home, you close every curtain, every door. You sit in darkness, the sound of rain your only companion. Beauty, you think, is no longer a gift, it's evidence, a link between admiration and accusation. You blow out the final candle. The smoke curls upward like a ghost, then disappears. Days turn into weeks, and London begins to forget Miss Haberzat, at least on the surface. Her name fades from the front pages, replaced by parliamentary scandals and theater reviews. But her story lingers in whispers, in the way strangers glance twice at you, or the way the florist pauses before saying, "You look just like." You don't correct them anymore. It's easier to let the myth breathe on its own. You've started walking along the Thames at night, the fog hugging the water like a silk shawl. The city feels larger after dark, but also oddly tender, its edges softened by distance. You think about escape sometimes, what it would mean to start over somewhere far away, where beauty isn't a brand, and reputation isn't currency. And then, by chance or fate, that dream finds a map. A letter arrives on thick paper, stamped with an unfamiliar crest. The Ladies' Society for Colonial Refinement cordially invites you to accompany a group of English women to India to assist in cultural instruction and the establishment of charitable schools. You stare at it for a long time. India, the empire's jewel, the horizon of opportunity, or so the pamphlets claim. Maybe, you think, cutie there would mean something different. Here's a mainstream historical fact. During the height of the British Empire, many women traveled abroad under philanthropic or educational missions. In reality, these journeys often reinforced Victorian ideals of femininity and race. English women were considered embodiments of moral purity, sent to civilize others through their presence as much as their teaching. You set the letter aside, then pick it up again. Leaving London feels like stepping out of your own shadow. You accept. Weeks later, the voyage begins. The sea stretches infinite and gray, waves lapping against the hull like restless hands. Salt stings your lips. Gulls cry overhead. At first, you're seasick, but soon you find a rhythm in the motion, the sway, the creak, the endless hum of wind. You spend your nights on deck, wrapped in a shawl, watching the stars appear like lanterns above the water. The ocean feels honest, vast, merciless, beautiful. It doesn't flatter. It doesn't gossip. You could almost imagine it washing away every rumor that clung to you in London. Historians still argue whether Victorian women abroad were liberators or tools of empire. Letters and diaries tell conflicting tales. Some found freedom and distance from British society, while others replicated its hierarchies across oceans. You suspect truth, as always, lives between extremes. When you arrive in Bombay, the air feels alive, spiced, sun-warmed, thick with sound. It's overwhelming, intoxicating, and nothing like the prim sketches in travel books. Streets teem with color, saris bright as jewels, fruit vendors calling out in melodic cadences, the clatter of carriages blending with temple bells. You stand in the middle of it all, your pale gown like a ghost among flames, and for the first time, you feel how foreignness reverses beauty's equation. Here, your English face is not admired, but scrutinized. It carries weight, expectation, even discomfort. A fellow traveler, Mrs. Beaumont, whispers beside you. They think us goddesses. Then, after a pause, but not kindly ones, you quickly learn that refinement means imposing English order where it doesn't belong. You're instructed to teach embroidery and etiquette to young girls, as if these skills could translate across cultures. Yet, when you look at their faces curious, it's quietly defiant to wonder who's truly being studied. One afternoon, a girl named Lada brings you a flower crown made of marigolds. She places it gently on your head, grinning. You catch your reflection in a brass bowl of water the orange blooms against your pale skin. Something inside you shifts. You look less like a teacher, more like a student. A quirky tidbit Victorian travelers often sent home locks of their hair woven into jewelry or art as proof of survival abroad. Some women even mailed curls preserved in envelopes labeled from Calcutta or from the Cape, as though hair itself could colonize the imagination. You think of your own. Here, the one thing London never lets you forget. Here, under the heat, it refuses to behave. Strands, curl, cling, rebel. You laugh softly. Good. You whisper. Let it. In the evenings, you write letters, never to post, just to purge thoughts. You describe the colors, the scents, the feeling of being unmade by heat and noise. They said India would make me exotic. You write, one night, but I think it's making me honest. Historians still debate whether women like you were transformed by empire or simply adapted to its illusions. You can feel both happening at once. Old habits dissolving, new hierarchies forming. Beauty here isn't just dangerous, it's political. That one evening, you attend a garden party hosted by a colonial officer and his wife. Lanterns swing from banyan trees, and musicians play beneath their shade. British women fan themselves while pretending not to melt. Indian guests watch politely, unreadable. You overhear a man say, "It's remarkable how our ladies bring grace to the tropics." The natives respond so well to gentility. You sip your drink and look away. Behind him, fireflies blink in the humid air, like laughter held in light. Later, Lada finds you at the edge of the garden. "You don't like the music?" she asks. "I like it very much," you say. "I'm just not sure it's meant for me." She tilts her head, studying you. You look lonely even when people look at you. You smile faintly. "That seems to follow me everywhere." When she leaves, you stand beneath the stars again, thinking about how far beauty travels and how it changes meaning with every border. You realize something quietly profound. The danger of being too beautiful was never only about vanity or jealousy. It was about power. Who defines it? Who benefits from it? Who pays the price for embodying it? The night air hums with insects and possibility. Somewhere in the distance, a temple bell rings, low and deep, like a heartbeat. You close your eyes, letting the sound sink into you. Maybe, just maybe, this is what freedom feels like. Not safety, but understanding. Weeks in India turn into months, and the air itself becomes part of you thick. Scented with spice and dust, pulsing with a rhythm that London never knew. You grow used to the hum of cicadas, the rustle of palm leaves, the soft thud of mangoes falling from trees. Life here feels slower, more fluid, as if time itself has loosened its corset. But word from England still arrives, bundled newspapers, letters, gossip disguised as concern. The portrait of you and Miss Havers has been moved to a new exhibition titled Fallen and Divine. Critics call it the essence of tragic femininity. You set the papers down, half laughing, half tired. Even an ocean away, you're still being mythologized. One evening, Mrs. Beaumont bursts into your quarters, cheeks flushed from excitement. "Have you heard?" she says. "There's talk back home of reformed doctors warning against tight lacing, of suffragists speaking in Parliament. The world is changing, my dear. We may finally breathe. You want to believe her. Truly, you do." Here's a mainstream historical fact. By the 1890s, the women's movement in Britain was gaining strength. Debates over dress reform, education, and voting rights began to shift public perception for the first time. Women were publicly challenging the idea that beauty equaled morality or obedience. You think of the women you left behind. Lady Venn with her hidden fire, the actress who became an echo, the countless others corseted by expectation. Maybe they, too, are daring to loosen the ribbons. Still, rebellion comes quietly at first. In Bombay, you see English women trading silk gowns for linen, fainting less, laughing more. They walk bareheaded, sometimes scandalous, but liberated. You catch your own reflection in a shop window, hair windblown, skin sun-warmed, and you hardly recognize yourself. You look alive. Historians still argue whether colonial life truly freed women or merely replaced one cage with another. Freedom, after all, can be performative too. A few days later, a letter arrives from London with Lord Meryton's signature. You hesitate before breaking the seal. Inside, his words shimmer with that old mix of charm and control. London remembers you fondly. The portrait continues to draw crowds. Should you ever return, society would be most eager to receive its lost muse once again. Muse. The word makes you wince. You're not an inspiration. You're a person. But you know how London thinks it adores resurrection stories. The fallen beauty returns, reformed, radiant. You can already see the headlines. That night, you sit by the open window, writing by lamplight. They still believe beauty belongs to them. You write, a currency they can spend, a relic to display. But out here, I've learned it can belong to no one. You pause, pen hovering. The lamplight flickers as a moth flutters near, fragile and frantic. You cup it gently, then let it go. A quirky tidbit in the late Victorian era. Some radical women hosted aesthetic evenings, gatherings where they rejected corsets, wore flowing robes, and read poetry about independence. Critics mocked them as the rational dress lunatics, but their rebellion planted seeds for modern feminism. You can imagine yourself there barefoot, laughing, wine glass in hand, reading aloud while the men frown into their brandy. It's a fantasy, but a delicious one. Back in India, you and Lada begin your own quiet rebellion. You stop enforcing embroidery lessons and instead teach English through storytelling. The girls write about storms and tigers and clever queens who outwit kings. When the mission's overseer visits, you feign compliance with a sweet smile. Yes, sir, we've been studying needlework, you say, while the girls smother giggles behind their notebooks. Power, you realize, doesn't always roar. Sometimes it hums under your breath. Historians still debate whether such small acts teaching forbidden subjects, writing secret journals, hosting quiet discussions were truly revolutionary. But for you, they feel like survival disguised as grace. As months pass, the letters from London change tone. The art critic who once praised your portrait now writes about the decline of modesty. Society, it seems, is learning to panic about women who don't play their parts. You fold the clipping and toss it into the sea. The waves swallow it without hesitation. One evening, Mrs. Beaumont joins you on the veranda. She fans herself lazily. Do you ever miss it? She asks. London. No, she says, being worshipped. You smile faintly. I miss being seen, you admit, but not being watched. She nods. That's the difference between admiration and possession. The conversation lingers in your mind. It strikes you that the danger of beauty was never beauty itself, it was ownership. Every portrait, every corset, every rumor was just a way of saying, you are ours to define. And yet, here, thousands of miles from that hungry gaze, you're beginning to define yourself. You stop powdering your face. You stop lowering your eyes when men speak. You stop apologizing for being visible. You start to live. There's a strange peace in the rebellion of existing. On your own terms. You walk through the marketplace alone, barefoot sometimes, letting the dust stain your hem. People stare, yes, but differently, not as if you're a trophy, but as if you're a question. That night, you write again. Perhaps beauty isn't dangerous when it's honest. Perhaps the peril comes only when others try to frame it, hang it, and call it finished. Historians still argue whether that moment, the slow shedding of ideals, the rediscovery of birthmarks, the true end of the Victorian woman, or merely her evolution. You suspect she never ended at all. She just changed her costume again. The rains come soon after. Thunder rolls over the city like a drum, and the air thickens with renewal. You stand by the window, watching lightning dance across the sky, feeling the electricity in your skin. The world feels on the verge of something vast and unspoken. You whisper to the storm, let it crack the porcelain, tan it does. The monsoon fades slowly, leaving behind a world scrubbed clean. The trees drip with leftover rain. The streets shine like obsidian, and the air smells faintly of earth and jasmine. You wake before dawn and sit by the open window, watching mist coil over the distant hills. It's quieter now. Maybe that's what freedom really sounds like silenced at. Doesn't demand apology. You've stopped receiving letters from London. At first, it unsettled you. Now, it feels like mercy. The absence of their words gives you space to hear your own. Your journal grows thick with pages, observations, dreams, bits of poetry. You write less about beauty and more about balance, between visibility and peace, between self and story. Still, every so often, you catch a glimpse of your reflection and see the faint outline of that girl from the portrait to one frozen mid-smile, waiting to be admired. She feels like another person entirely. You nod to her, gently, as if forgiving a ghost. Here's a mainstream historical fact. By the turn of the century, Cadia photography began to replace painted portraits as the dominant way of capturing beauty. It democratized the image. Anyone could be immortalized, but it also intensified the pressure to look perfect. Beauty's cage simply changed material from canvas to camera. You run your fingers through your hair, no longer pinned, no longer gilded in. Think about how that same instinct still pulses through time. The desire to be seen, the danger of being seen too much. One afternoon, you visit the local photographer, a quiet man who works from a dim studio filled with glass plates and chemical scents. Would you like a portrait? He asks. You hesitate. Only if I can keep it. He nods. The shutter clicks softly, a blink of history. When he hands you the print later, the image startles you. It's imperfect. A stray curl across your cheek, a smudge of light near your shoulder. Eyes not quite symmetrical, but it's real. It's yours. You tuck it into your journal with a smile. Historians still argue whether Victorian ideals of beauty ever truly disappeared or simply evolved into subtler forms. You suspect they just learned to hide better beneath filters under hashtags. Inside, quiet insecurities that feel new but aren't. Every era finds its own corset. Weeks later, a steamer ship docks in Bombay Harbor, bound for London. Mrs. Beaumont is returning home. She begs you to come, promising they've forgotten the scandal. You'd be welcomed like a heroine. Shake your head. I'd rather not be a heroine. They never live long in stories. She laughs, kisses your cheek, and boards the ship. You wave until the masts vanish into haze. When the sea swallows the last hint of white sail, you feel an odd lightness, like closing a chapter mid-sentence, because you already know the ending. A quirky tidbit. At the dawn of the 20th century, travel guides began marketing spiritual journeys for English women returning from India. They claimed such trips brought enlightenment conveniently, renewed popularity in London drawing rooms. Even rebellion, it seemed, could be repackaged for society's comfort. You spend your final months teaching, reading, and writing. Some nights, you tell stories to Lada and the girls under the banyan tree tales, not of princesses or angels, but of women who survived simply by being themselves. Their laughter mixes with the night breeze, carrying something ancient and tender through the dark. Historians still debate what became of women like you. It's the ones who slipped quietly out of London's grasp. Some say they disappeared into anonymity. Others suggest they built small revolutions far from home. Maybe both are true. Maybe that's the secret. Not to escape the story, but to write your own ending. You look at your reflection one last time before bed, tan skin, clear eyes, lines of sun around your mouth from smiling too much. It's not the face they painted. It's better. You whisper to the mirror, let them have their angels and their tragedies. I'll take the in-between. And with that, you blow out the lamp. The room softens into darkness, the air humming faintly with crickets and peace. Now the night grows slower, like a curtain drifting closed. You're back in your room, half dreaming, the candlelight fading into amber haze. You can almost hear the soft patter of London rain mingling with the hush of faraway monsoon winds. Everything that happened, every corset string, every portrait, every whispered danger feels like it's folding itself gently away, layer by delicate layer. You breathe out and realize how light you've become, how far you've traveled from that girl who thought beauty was a crown rather than a chain. Maybe the Victorian world never truly ended. Maybe it just learned new tricks, but you've learned how to look straight into the mirror without flinching. Let your breath slow with the rhythm of history exhaling through you. Imagine the painted ballroom dissolving into mist, the lace masks falling to the floor, the echo of polite laughter fading into the distance. What remains is simpler, a body that belongs to itself, a heartbeat steady and honest beneath quiet skin. Outside your window, the world keeps turning somewhere. Dawn is already brushing over another century. The danger of being too beautiful is long gone now, at least for tonight. You're safe, unobserved, perfectly ordinary in the best possible way. So close your eyes. Let the candle gutter out, the sound of the fan blending into a soft lullaby. You've outlasted the portraits and the poisons, the rumors and the ribbons, and in this gentle dark, the only thing left to admire is peace, sweet dreams.